I am Aaliyah, 25 years old. I value my independence, my fiercely guarded privacy, and my perfectly quiet house. I never planned on playing the role of a mother, but my older sister and her new boyfriend just left for a luxurious trip to Europe, carelessly dumping her 10-year-old daughter on my doorstep for an entire week. Standing in the freezing entryway of my Billings, Montana home, I watched their cab speed away down the icy street. Just moments before stepping out into the cold, my sister had turned to me. She wore a chilling, calculating smirk. "Don't get too attached, Elia," she warned. "When I get back, she won't be my responsibility anymore." The heavy front door clicked shut. It trapped the bitter winter chill outside, leaving a suffocating silence in my living room. I turned around slowly. The little girl was standing rigidly against the hallway wall, clutching a battered, empty-looking backpack to her chest. Her eyes darted around like a cornered animal waiting for punishment. Before I could even point her toward the guest room, she took a sharp, shaky breath. She looked up at me with terrified, wide eyes. "Aunt Elia," she whispered, her voice barely breaking the silence. "I have a secret I need to tell you. But you can't let them know." What she revealed next did not just shatter my peaceful life. It made my blood run absolutely cold, exposing a level of greed and cruelty I never thought possible. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy gripping family dramas and stories of ultimate justice, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned because you will not believe how this nightmare ends. Right after the heavy front door closed, I looked down at Bailey. I stood in the silent hallway and waited for the secret she had just mentioned. The taxi engine faded down the street, leaving us completely alone in the house. Bailey parted her dry lips. She took a shallow breath to speak. She looked at my face, and then she looked at the locked front door. A sudden wave of sheer terror washed over her pale features. She took a quick step backward. She pulled her worn, deflated backpack tightly against her chest. She held it like a physical shield to block a blow. She stammered. Her voice shook violently. "I was going to tell you, but I cannot. If I say it, I say it. My mother will find out. She always finds out. She will know I talked. She will hate me even more." She stared at the floor, waiting for my reaction. She expected me to yell. She expected me to rip the secret out of her by force. I did not do that. I did not press the issue. I simply nodded once. I pointed her toward the small guest bedroom down the hall. "You can put your bag in there," I said. "That is your room. For the week." She scurried away silently. She walked on the very tips of her toes to avoid making any noise on the hardwood floor. Dinner that evening was absolutely suffocating. The tension in the air felt thick enough to cut with a knife. I cooked a simple plate of spaghetti and meatballs. I set 2 plates on the kitchen island. I poured 2 glasses of ice water. I sat down on my stool and picked up my fork. Bailey stood near the edge of the kitchen. She did not sit down. She did not move toward the hot food. She just stared at the plate with wide, hungry eyes. Her hands remained firmly clasped behind her back. "Sit down," I told her. She climbed onto the tall stool, carefully making sure the chair did not scrape against the floor. She folded her hands in her lap. She kept her head bowed. The steam rose from the pasta, but she did not reach for her silverware. Her stomach let out a loud, hollow growl. She flinched as if the natural sound of her own hunger was a crime. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for a reprimand. "Eat your food, Bailey," I said. That single command flipped a switch inside her. Brain. Bailey grabbed her fork and began to eat. It was not normal eating. It was a frantic, desperate consumption. She shoveled the food into her mouth at a terrifying speed. She barely chewed the meat. She swallowed large bites whole. Her eyes darted constantly toward my hands and my face. She ate exactly like a starving street dog that expected a larger animal to snatch the meal away at any given second. I stopped eating. I put my fork down and just watched her. A 10-year-old child should complain about the tomato sauce. A normal kid would make a mess or try to talk about their favorite television show. Bailey did none of that. She operated in pure survival mode. The absolute silence in the kitchen grew heavy and incredibly dark. I reached across the kitchen island to grab the salt shaker. As my snort's arm moved, my elbow bumped my own metal fork lying on the edge of my plate. The utensil slipped off the counter. It fell toward the tile floor. Clang. The sharp noise shattered the quiet room. Before the fork even stopped bouncing on the floor, Bailey reacted. She did not just jump. She practically threw herself off the tall kitchen stool. She hit the ground hard on her knees. She curled her small body into a tight defensive ball, right under the counter. Both of her hands slapped over the back of her head, locking her fingers tightly together to protect her skull and her face. "I am sorry," she shrieked, her voice cracked with raw panic. "I am sorry. I did not mean to. Please do not hit me. I will clean it up. I am sorry." She was hyperventilating. Her entire body shook violently against the cold kitchen tiles. She gasped for air between her desperate apologies. I froze in my seat. My heart hammered aggressively against my ribs. I looked down at the dropped fork, and then I looked at my niece cowering under the table. I did not raise my voice. I did not make any sudden movements. I slowly pushed my chair back. I lowered myself to the floor and kept a safe distance from her. "Bailey?" I said softly, keeping my tone perfectly even. "It is okay. Look at me. I dropped it. It was my fault, not yours. You are safe here." She did not uncurl her body. She kept her arms wrapped tightly around her head, rocking back and forth slightly. She braced herself for a physical blow that was never going to come from me. In that horrifying moment, the ugly truth became undeniably clear. This was not the behavior of a well-disciplined child. This was not strict parenting. This was the raw, unfiltered reflex of a severely abused kid. Jean and Mitchell were actively breaking her spirit through constant fear and violence. My sister was a monster. I sat on the kitchen floor and watched this broken child tremble, realizing that my quiet, independent life was officially over. 2 days passed in tense silence until at 2:08 in the morning on Monday, a rattling noise from the office woke me up. I sat up straight in bed. My house was always perfectly quiet at night. The sound came again. It was a distinct shuffle of paper. It was followed by the soft clinking of metal against wood. Someone was moving around in the dark. I threw off my blankets. I stepped quietly into the hallway. I walked silently toward the noise. The door to my home office stood slightly ajar. I pushed the door open. I reached out and flicked the light. "Switch!" Bailey gasped loudly. She dropped a thick manila folder. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy slap. She was kneeling right in front of my desk. Her small hands were frantically digging through the second drawer. That was the only drawer. I never locked. It held my financial records, my tax returns, and my most important property documents. For one long second, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other. Then Bailey completely shattered. She fell forward. She curled her thin body into a tight ball on the floor. She began to sob uncontrollably. Her small shoulders heaved with violent panic. She hyperventilated. She choked on her own tears. I did not yell. I did not grab her. I lowered myself to the floor. I sat cross-legged beside her and waited. I let her cry until her breathing finally slowed down. "Bailey," I said firmly, "tell me exactly what you are looking for." She squeezed her eyes shut. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. She made me do it." "Who made you do it?" "My mother," she choked out. The shock hit me hard. I demanded a full explanation. The dark truth poured out of her in a rushed, terrified stream. "Last month, Jean came over for a surprise visit. She claimed she missed me. She brought Bailey along." I remembered that specific afternoon perfectly. I had walked into the kitchen to brew some coffee. In those brief 5 minutes, Jean had slipped down the hall. She dragged Bailey into my office. She pointed directly at this exact desk drawer. She forced her daughter to memorize the exact location. "She told me I had to find the papers with the red stamps," Bailey whispered. She stared blankly at the floor. "She said Mitchell needs them." I asked her specific papers they demanded. Bailey recited the list like a programmed robot. Jean and Mitchell had clearly drilled these terms into her head for weeks. They needed my personal number. They needed the original property deed. They needed my recent tax returns. Most importantly, they needed any official document displaying my sample signature. My mind raced. I pieced their sinister puzzle together instantly. Mitchell was planning to use my identity and my property documents. He wanted to apply for a fraudulent mortgage. They were going to drain the equity out of my home. They would take the cash and leave me with a massive debt. It was grand theft. It was a federal crime orchestrated by my own sister. They actually believed I was blind enough to let this happen under my own roof. They told me to take pictures of every single page, Bailey continued. Her voice shook violently. Mitchell gave me an old phone. He said I have to email all the photos to him before Friday. If I do, not send them, or if you catch me. She stopped. She buried her face in her hands. What did Jean say she would do, Bailey? She said she would throw me away. The little girl cried. She promised she would drop me off at a state orphanage. She said she would never come back. She told me I am just a burden. She said this is the only way I can pay for my food. I stared at the 10-year-old child sobbing on my floor. The sheer evil of their plan paralyzed me. My sister had weaponized her own child. Jean and Mitchell were sipping wine in Europe. Meanwhile, this terrified girl was forced to commit corporate theft under the threat of total abandonment. I reached out. I gently closed the open drawer. I picked up the fallen folder. You are not going to an orphanage, I said coldly. And you are not taking any pictures. I am going to stop them. The next morning, I decided to get Bailey out of that suffocating house. I drove us straight to the largest shopping mall in Billings. The car ride was completely silent. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat. She kept her eyes glued to the window, terrified of making a sound. I refused to let her spend another minute locked in a state of pure terror. Today was about breaking her invisible chains. We walked through the heavy glass doors into the bustling mall. I steered us directly toward the bright food court. I stopped right in front of a busy ice cream parlor. The display case was packed, with dozens of colorful tubs. Bailey stood frozen behind me. She kept a very safe distance. Her hands gripped the bottom edge of her faded shirt. She braced herself for a scolding. All right, Bailey, I said. I turned to face her directly. What flavor do you want? She blinked. She stared up at me in pure disbelief. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out at all. She looked left and right. She expected a trap to spring shut on her. Me? She whispered. She pointed a trembling finger at her own chest. I get to pick. Of course you do, I replied immediately. Pick whatever you want. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, it is your choice. She stepped forward slowly. Her eyes were wide as saucers. She examined the glass case for a long time. She studied every single option. She was absolutely terrified of making a wrong choice. Finally, she pointed a shaking finger at the strawberry tub. Snorts. It was a simple choice for a 10-year-old. Yet it felt like a monumental victory. She had never been allowed to have a preference. Jean had completely stripped away her basic right to exist as a normal kid. I bought her a large scoop. I watched her eat it with cautious, quiet joy. Next, I marched her into the biggest children's clothing store I could find. The racks were filled with vibrant winter gear, thick sweaters, and colorful dresses. Bailey immediately shrank back. She was deeply intimidated by the bright lights and the endless options. She instinctively reached for the clearance rack in the darkest corner of the store. She grabbed a dull gray sweater. It was easily 3 sizes too big and entirely shapeless. No, I told her. I gently took the gray fabric from her hands. I placed it back on the rack. We are not doing that today. Look around this whole store. Find the colors you actually like. Pick the things you want to wear. She looked at me. She desperately searched my face for hidden anger. She found none. A tiny spark of hope ignited in her eyes. It took 20 minutes of coaxing. Slowly, she started touching the fabrics. She pulled out a soft pink winter coat. She grabbed a pair of proper denim jeans. She picked a warm, fleece-lined purple dress. I led her into the fitting room area. I handed her the stack of clothes. Try these on, I instructed. She struggled, with the broken zipper of her oversized ugly jacket. I stepped in to help her. I pulled the heavy jacket off her narrow shoulders. She lifted her arms to take off her shirt. She pulled her faded t-shirt up just a few inches. I froze. My breath caught sharply in my throat. Right along her ribs, I saw it. It was exposed just above the waistband of her threadbare, heavily hand-stitched underwear. It was a faint, ugly bruise. It was yellowing at the edges. It was the unmistakable mark of a hard, deliberate pinch or a vicious strike. The stark contrast between that painful physical injury and her pathetic undergarments painted a horrifying picture. It showed her daily reality behind closed doors. Jean and Mitchell were absolute monsters. They used her as a punching bag. I quickly helped her pull the warm purple dress over her head. I had to hide my intense anger before it scared her back into her shell. Bailey smoothed the soft fleece down her sides. She turned around to face the full-length mirror. She stared at her own reflection for a very long time. The heavy, terrified look vanished from her face. It was replaced by a soft, genuine glow. She looked like a real child again. Without a single word, she turned away from the mirror. She walked straight toward me. She wrapped her small arms tightly around my waist. She buried her face deep into my coat. "This is the first time someone bought me new clothes," she whispered against the fabric. The last defensive wall around my heart crumbled completely. I wrapped my arms securely around her trembling shoulders. I pulled her close to my chest. I closed my eyes. I let the silent tears stream down my face. I was overwhelmed by a fierce protective instinct. I promised myself I would destroy the people who hurt her. On Tuesday afternoon, while Bailey was taking a nap, I sat inside my car in the driveway and called my family lawyer, Mr. Davis. I gripped the leather steering wheel tightly. I laid out the entire situation. I explained the midnight discovery in my office. I detailed Mitchell and Jean's intricate plot to steal my property deed for a fraudulent mortgage. I fully expected Mr. Davis to tell me to dial emergency services immediately. Instead, Mr. Davis stopped me entirely. His voice was deadly serious. He delivered a harsh dose of legal reality. He warned me that a 10-year-old child's uncorroborated testimony holds virtually zero weight in a criminal court. Defense attorneys would aggressively cross-examine Bailey. They would tear her apart on the witness stand. They would claim she was simply confused by adult conversations. They would argue I deliberately manipulated the child to steal custody. We could not walk into a police station with nothing but a frightened girl's whisper. We needed direct, irrefutable evidence. We needed a recorded confession. I ended the phone call. A wave of pure determination washed over my body. I walked back inside the house. I went into the guest room and woke Bailey up. I sat her down at the kitchen table. I explained exactly what we had to do. She was absolutely terrified. Her body shook violently at the mere thought of speaking to her mother. I held both of her hands. I promised her she was completely safe. I told her this was the only way to stop them permanently. She finally nodded. That evening, we set the perfect trap. We placed Bailey's cheap prepaid phone carefully on the kitchen counter. We propped it up against a heavy water glass. I checked the camera angle to ensure only Bailey was visible in the frame. I stood pressed flat against the refrigerator, completely hidden in the blind spot. I held my own smartphone steady. I pressed the record button. I gave Bailey a silent countdown with my fingers. 3, 2, 1. Bailey initiated the video call. It rang 3 times, the connection established. Mitchell appeared on the small digital screen. He was lounging casually on a pristine white bed in a luxurious European hotel. He held a glass of dark red wine. He leaned his face close to the camera lens. He did not explicitly say the words property deed. He did not mention the bank or the mortgage fraud. He was very careful. He strictly used their established code. "Well?" Mitchell demanded. His voice dripped with heavy impatience. "Have you found the papers with the state seals yet? Did you check the second drawer your mother showed?" "You!" Bailey swallowed hard. Her fear was entirely real. She did not have to act at all. "I am looking," she answered. Her voice trembled violently. "I have not found them yet." Mitchell rolled his eyes in profound annoyance. He sighed loudly. Before he could speak again, Jean aggressively shoved him out of the video frame. My sister's face suddenly filled the entire screen. Her eyes were wide with unadulterated rage. The lavish hotel room behind her heavily contrasted with the ugly venom in her voice. "Listen to me very closely, you useless brat," Jean hissed. She glared fiercely through the lens. "We are not playing games with you. You know exactly what we need. You know exactly where it is. If I do not receive those pictures in my email by Friday, you better pack your trash bags. You are not coming back to my house. You prepare to live on the streets. I will drop you at the nearest shelter and completely forget you ever existed." Bailey whimpered quietly. She stared down at the kitchen counter. "Do not fail me," Jean snapped aggressively. "Friday." The video call abruptly ended. The screen went completely black. Heavy silence filled the kitchen. Bailey let out a long, shaky breath. She looked up at me with fresh tears pooling in her eyes. I did not say a single word. I simply looked down at my own glowing phone screen. I pressed the red stop button. The video file saved directly to my secure cloud storage. I had absolutely everything. The aggressive tone, the specific mention of the drawer, the clear confirmation of the state seal documents, the horrific, undeniable threat of child abandonment. It was the absolute perfect trap. The ironclad evidence was perfectly recorded. On Friday afternoon, the taxi carrying Jean and Mitchell from the airport turned into my driveway. The vehicle stopped. Abruptly. I stood perfectly still by the front living room window. I watched them step out of the car. They casually pulled their expensive suitcases from the trunk. Bailey stood completely frozen a few feet behind me. Her entire body trembled violently. I reached back. I squeezed her small shoulder firmly. I told her to stay calm and stay exactly behind me. The heavy front door swung open. Jean stepped inside the house first. She dropped her designer travel bag onto the floor. She immediately launched into a sickeningly fake performance. "Oh, my sweet girl," Jean squealed loudly. Her voice echoed in the quiet room. "I missed my daughter so much." She walked quickly toward Bailey. She wrapped her arms around the child in a highly awkward, stiff hug. Bailey did not hug her mother back. She kept both of her arms pinned rigidly to her sides. She stared blankly at the wall. Mitchell walked through the door next. He did not say hello. He did not even look at his girlfriend's daughter. He scanned the living room. His eyes darted straight down the hallway, locking directly onto the closed door of my home office. "How was the trip?" I asked coldly. I did not offer a hug. I walked toward the open kitchen. "Let me get you both some water." I turned my back to them. I reached into the upper cabinet. I grabbed 2 glass tumblers. I turned on the cold water faucet. I did not look at the sink. I stared directly into the dark reflective glass of the microwave door. Jean immediately dropped her fake loving smile. She stepped away from Bailey. She nudged Mitchell sharply in the ribs with her elbow. She jerked her chin toward the hallway. Mitchell nodded once. He stepped silently away from the living room area. He moved quickly and quietly toward the office. He firmly believed I was completely oblivious. He thought he was seconds away from securing his fraudulent mortgage documents. I turned off the running water. I left the empty glasses in the sink. I turned around and walked back into the living room. I held a thick manila folder tightly in my right hand. Mitchell already had his hand resting on the brass doorknob of my office. "Mitchell," I called out sharply. He stopped dead in his tracks. He turned around slowly, pasting a very fake, innocent smile on his face. I did not say another word to him. I walked directly to the glass coffee table in the center of the room. I raised my arm and slammed the heavy folder down onto the hard surface. Smack. The loud noise made Jean jump backward. "Are you looking for this?" I asked. My voice was completely flat. It carried absolutely zero fear. Mitchell stared at the yellow folder. He dropped his hand from the doorknob. He walked slowly back into the living room. He glanced at Jean. Jean, snorts gave him a highly confused look. Mitchell reached out. He flipped the cardboard cover open. He fully expected to see my original property deed. He expected to find my tax returns and my signature samples. He saw nothing of the sort. He saw a cleanly printed copy of an emergency protective petition. It was officially addressed to the state family court. Sitting right on top of that legal document was a small silver USB drive. I had clearly labeled the drive with a thick black marker. It simply read, "Video confession, fraud, and abuse." Mitchell picked up the plastic drive. He read the handwritten label. The color completely drained from his face in less than a second. His arrogant confidence vanished instantly. He looked down at the legal document underneath it. He saw his own name printed next to the words, "Criminal Fraud." He realized the trap had snapped completely shut. The dangerous game was entirely over. "What the hell is this?" he roared. He completely lost his temper. Snorts. He crushed the court papers in his fist. "You recorded us!" Jean screamed, her voice cracking with pure rage. She lunged forward, aiming directly for Bailey. I stepped quickly into her path, blocking her entirely. Mitchell cursed violently. He realized the digital file on that drive would put him in a federal prison. He let out a loud, furious yell. He charged directly at me. He raised his heavy arm, aiming to strike my face and grab the remaining papers. He shoved his shoulder violently into my chest. I stumbled backward, hitting the hard edge of the sofa. He lunged for my throat. A chaotic physical struggle broke out instantly in the middle of the room. Right as Mitchell swung his heavy arm to push me backward, the piercing wail of police sirens tore through the end of the street. Red and blue lights flashed directly through the living room windows. Mitchell froze mid-strike. His aggressive momentum completely vanished. He turned his head toward the glass. Panic washed over his face. Before he could take a step toward the back door, heavy boots pounded onto the front porch. The front door flew wide open. I had left it unlocked on purpose. 2 uniformed Billings police officers stormed inside. They drew their weapons immediately. They pointed them straight at Mitchell's chest. "Get on the ground!" the taller officer roared. "Get on the ground right now!" Mitchell hesitated. He looked frantically around the room. He had zero chance of escaping. The second officer lunged forward. He grabbed Mitchell by the shoulders. He slammed the heavy man face first into the hardwood floor. The impact shook the glass coffee table. Mitchell groaned in pain. The officer aggressively pulled Mitchell's arms behind his back. The metal handcuffs clicked sharply around his wrists. The officer read him his rights loudly. He arrested Mitchell for aggravated assault and severe conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The trap had worked flawlessly. Jean stood frozen in the center of the room. She watched her criminal boyfriend get dragged to his knees. Her face turned ghost white. Then her survival instincts kicked in. She instantly launched into a disgusting theatrical performance. A stern woman in a sharp gray suit walked through the open front door. She wore an official lanyard around her neck. She was an agent from Child Protective Services. Jean threw herself toward the agent. She forced loud sobs from her throat, squeezing her eyes to produce fake crocodile tears. "Thank God you are here!" Jean screamed. She pointed a shaking finger directly at me. "My sister is crazy. She kidnapped my daughter. She held us hostage in this house. She is trying to steal my baby. Please, you have to arrest her." She put on a desperate show for the authorities. She fully expected the agent to hand Bailey over immediately. The CPS worker did not even blink. She did not offer a single word of comfort. She looked at Jean with pure disgust. She calmly opened her leather briefcase. She pulled out a thick stack of official papers. She held the top document directly in front of Jean's face. "Hey, Jean," the agent stated coldly. "This is an emergency protective custody order. It was signed by a federal judge exactly 20 minutes ago. We have already reviewed the video confession your sister submitted. Your Snort's parental rights are temporarily suspended effective immediately." Jean stopped crying instantly. Her fake tears vanished. Her jaw dropped open in absolute shock. The loving mother mask completely fell off. The CPS worker turned her head. She signaled a female police officer standing by the door. The officer walked gently toward the hallway. Bailey, Snorts, stood there trembling. The officer knelt down. She spoke softly to the terrified girl. She led Bailey carefully into the adjacent kitchen for an immediate physical assessment. They needed to document the horrific bruises I had discovered at the mall. The undeniable proof of physical abuse was about to be photographed for the court. Bailey did not cry anymore. She simply let the officer lift her shirt. She knew she was finally safe. Jean lost her mind completely. She realized she had lost her pawn. She lost her chance at the fraudulent money. She lost everything. She began to curse violently. She screamed awful, vicious profanities at me. She thrashed around wildly, trying to break past the agent. The officers did not tolerate her aggression. They grabbed Jean by both arms. They forced her hands behind her back. They slapped a pair of cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists. She kicked the air. She spat on the floor. She fought them like a wild animal. They dragged her forcefully out of my house. They marched them down the front steps past my watching neighbors. The police shoved the two criminals into the back of separate patrol cars. I stood in my living room. I listened to the heavy car doors slam shut. The sirens faded away. I looked around my quiet house. A massive weight finally lifted off my chest. The brutal nightmare was officially over. My niece was finally free from her abusers. After many long months of intense investigation and grueling trials in Yellowstone County, I held Bailey's hand tightly as we walked out of the heavy oak doors. The state criminal court had just delivered a swift, brutal hammer of absolute justice. The ironclad video recording completely destroyed their pathetic defense strategy instantly. Mitchell received a rigid 5-year prison sentence in a maximum security federal facility. He was convicted of severe conspiracy to commit massive financial fraud and aggravated assault. Jean sat completely frozen in her bright orange jumpsuit as the stern judge read her final sentence. She received a mandatory 3-year prison term for criminal child endangerment and active participation in the fraud scheme. They both lost their freedom instantly. Armed bailiffs dragged them roughly back to their cold holding cells. I watched my own sister disappear behind a heavy steel door. I did not feel a single drop of pity for her. The separate family court proceedings were equally decisive. The presiding judge meticulously reviewed the extensive medical records. He listened carefully to the chilling testimony from the Child Protective Services agent regarding the severe psychological neglect. The court issued an immediate permanent termination of Jean's parental rights. She lost all legal claims to Bailey forever. The very same judge smiled warmly down at us from the high wooden bench. He officially signed the final adoption decrees. I picked up the black pen and signed my own name firmly on the dotted line. Bailey was no longer a discarded niece. She was my legally adopted daughter. She proudly took my last name. We breathed the crisp Montana air as a real, unbreakable family. That monumental day was exactly 2 years ago. Our daily lives look completely different today. I stood in the doorway of my bright kitchen this morning. Bright sunlight poured heavily through the large bay windows. It illuminated the entire room with a warm, comforting golden glow. Bailey sat comfortably at the wide kitchen island. She hummed a cheerful tune. She was completely focused on a large watercolor painting. Colorful markers and paintbrushes were scattered playfully across the counter. I walked toward the refrigerator to grab a cold water bottle. As I reached out, my elbow accidentally bumped a heavy ceramic coffee mug sitting dangerously close to the edge. It tipped over instantly. It crashed loudly onto the hard tile floor. 2 years ago, that exact sound would have sent her spiraling into a severe panic attack. Today, Bailey did not flinch. She did not dive under the heavy oak table to hide. She did not throw her thin arms over her head in terror. She did not beg for violent mercy. She simply stopped humming, looked down at the broken pieces, and let out a soft giggle. "I will get the broom, Mom," she said casually. She hopped off. Her wooden stool to help me clean up the mess. The deep psychological scars were finally healing properly. The paralyzing fear was entirely gone forever. I smiled proudly at my incredibly brave daughter. We built a beautiful, peaceful life out of absolute chaos and pure betrayal. True family has absolutely nothing to do with shared blood or matching genetics. Blood can easily create a vicious monster. Family is strictly defined by fierce protection, unwavering safety, and pure love. Family is the person who stands firmly in front of you when darkness tries to swallow you whole. I fought a brutal war to protect this girl. I won absolutely everything. Thank you so much for listening to our entire story today. If you felt deeply inspired by this intense journey of ultimate justice and incredible healing, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you firmly agree that family is built on fierce protection rather than simple biology? Let me know your honest opinions right now. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more intense real-life drama stories. Stay safe and always protect the people you love.